Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 100 Degrees. I'm your host, Patrick Ross. Now, like I said last week, do you like this smile? I hope that you do like this smile. And this week, you're going to see an awful lot more of it because we just don't have as much serious business on the docket this week. This week, we get to have a lot more fun than we had last week. So let's just jump right on into the fun. Last week, we had some pretty serious business to start with. It's not any less serious this week than it was last week. But this year, we have a way more fun story to start with, and let's talk about it. The 2008 World Cup of Hockey is coming to Alberta. So there's going to be three host cities for this World Cup. One is going to be Prague in Czechia. That's where the European pool is going to play. They haven't really announced anything yet, but I would kind of think that you're probably going to see probably the Czech Republic, pardon me, Czechia. I can't believe I just. Oh, so you're going to see Czechia, probably going to see Slovakia, probably Finland and Sweden playing in Prague in their round robin. And then in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta, they're going to be hosting in their new building, which is going to be open by that point. If the conceptual drawings are any indication, it's going to be ugly as sin, but it should be done by then and it should be open. And so in that pool, you're going to see Canada, the United States. I would think that there's a pretty good chance that you're going to see Germany and Switzerland. Unless the NHL decides to go back to this Team North America, like the Team Rookies and the Team Europe format like they did before. But God, I really hope that they don't. But regardless, you're going to see a bunch of games in Calgary. You're going to see a bunch of games played in Prague. And then the semifinals and the finals are going to get played in Edmonton, much to the chagrin of the Flames Nation podcast. Oh, they are so salty that they just didn't get all of the games. Like they were going to let them have all of those games in that eyesore that they're building in downtown Calgary. Like, go check out the conceptual drawings. I'm sorry, I could be wrong about this, but I think this is going to looks like it's going to be an ugly building. Now, you know what's not going to be ugly is something that's going to start in that building and then it's going to continue in Rogers Place in Edmonton, hopefully right up until the final. And that's going to be a successful defense of the World Cup of Hockey by Team Canada. There's been 4 World Cups played. Canada's won 3 of them. In the United States, they won the first one. They won the one in 1996. Prior to these Olympic Games, it was their last best-on-best tournament win. It's been quite a long time waiting for them to win another one. But now that they have won another one, let's talk about something that I think that a lot of American hockey fans, they haven't really accustomed themselves to this reality just yet. And that is that when it comes to hockey, here in Canada, we hate to lose. We fucking hate to lose. So that means that when it comes to a best on best hockey tournament, if we don't win, that's not really the end of it. Like, that's the end of that particular tournament. But it's not the end of what we would consider the issue. What do we do? What does Canada do? We go back, we regroup, we come back, and we win. That's what we do. And so, with this being the next best on best hockey competition, everybody needs to understand that right now Canada is going back to the drawing board. We're figuring out why we didn't win at the Olympics in 2026. We're figuring out exactly how we're going to win the 2028 World Cup of Hockey. So this idea that a lot of American fans seem to have, that they think that they're the new top dogs of hockey, yeah, don't get comfortable. We're coming to take it right back. That's the goal. And so, with that in mind, I think that we do have to ask the question: exactly how is Canada going to go back to? How exactly are we going to accomplish this? How exactly are we going to win the 2028 World Cup of Hockey? Well, We've already started it. Doug Armstrong has stepped down as the general manager of Team Canada, so there will be a new general manager in place. And whoever gets picked to be the new general manager for Team Canada, well, now they have to figure out how they're going to build that team. And with that in mind, I'd actually kind of like to rewind a little bit. Let's go back to the 2004 World Cup. It wasn't really so much of like a revenge World Cup, as it was really just a continuation of Canada's, we were kind of establishing at that point as Canada's best on best hockey dominance. And I want to take a very close look at the way that team in 2004 was built. Because there were a lot of different ways that team could have been built. I think that a lot of people probably tend to have a look at that team and say to themselves, well, it's just a continuation of what happened in 2002. Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't. There was actually a very high rate of turnover in that team from 2004 from 2002. And so let's just kind of take a look at some of the guys that were on that team. So first of all, you have what you would call like the core, like the core players. The guys that they already know right off the bat. Like as soon as this thing is announced, they've already announced who the first bunch of players are going to be. And so when you take a look at that 2004 World Cup roster for Team Canada, here are the guys that just everybody just knew right off the bat were definitely going to go. Now, keep in mind that Chris Pronger was injured and not able to participate in the 2004 tournament. But aside from that, obviously you had Joe Sakic, Mario Lemieux, Scott Niedermayer, Ed Jovanovski, Jerome McGinley, and Adam Foote. And those were the guys that carried over from the previous team. Well, I guess not all of them. But that was generally considered to be like that's your core group of players for this team. But what I actually argue is that the 2004 Team Canada that participated in the World Cup was really a team that had two cores. And what the task of the general manager was to kind of bring these two cores together. Now let's talk about the second one, because to me, in my opinion, the second one is much more interesting. So when you look at that one, you had goaltender Roberto Luongo, Robin Regehr, defenseman from the Calgary Flames, Ryan Smith from the Edmonton Oilers, and of course he had been there in 2002, and he came back in 2004. Eric Brewer, similar situation, was there in 2002, did come back to 2004, but just put a pin in that because I'm going to get to this. There was Jay Bouwmeester, Scott Hannon, Shane Doan, Chris Draper, Kirk Maltby, and Danny Heatley. So what did all of these players have in common? These were all players that had spent the previous bunch of years playing for what, for teams that were either like sporadically playoff teams or not playoff teams at all. And so then what did a lot of players back then, and in fact still now, do when they don't make the playoffs? Well, then they take a call from Team Canada and they go over to Europe and they play in the World Championships. And these were all players that had played in the World Championships over those preceding years. In fact, really interesting one here. In particular, Shane Doan, Chris Draper, Kirk Maltby, the international grind line. At least two of those guys, if you just kind of looked purely at their NHL stats, well, then you probably wouldn't take them on an international best-on-best Team Canada. But not only did we take them, but we won that tournament, and they were a huge part of that. So probably Chris Draper and Kirk Maltby don't make that team unless they've been overseas playing on that international grind line with Shane Doan. And arguably, yeah, definitely a bunch of those other guys, they do make that team even without that. But what I would argue about that team in particular is that one of the reasons why they were able to come together and gel as a team as quickly as they did was because so many of those guys were familiar with each other, not really from the 2002 Olympics. Because in actuality, most of those guys weren't there. The reason why those players are so familiar with each other was because they had played so often at the World Championships together. And so looking at that in particular, you had a team that for various reasons needed a bit of a retooling, whether that was due to injuries or just players getting older, in the case of, say, Steve Yzerman, you had a team that definitely needed some young blood. And they found that young blood at the World Championships. And they just basically, rather than building the team around those guys that returned from 2002, they actually kind of built that team around those guys who had been spending all of that time playing together at the World Championships. So if I were the new general manager of Team Canada, I think that's actually one of the first places that I would look to. I would look to who's been playing at the World Championships, who's been playing well for us at the World Championships, and I would look to a lot of those players to form something of like a secondary core to build this team around. Now, that is something that I've actually been saying for years. Like, I've actually always said that, like, participation in the World Championships should be considered to be something of a, like, maybe like a secondary selection criteria when it comes time to put together these teams. You definitely do want to incentivize guys to go over to Europe and play in the World Championships. And so what's the better way to do that than to just be able to say to them, it's like, guys, we will definitely, if you come play at the World Championships, it's going to improve your chances of playing in the Olympics. Or in this particular instance, it's going to improve your chances of playing in the World Cup. It's something that's worked pretty spectacularly for us before, so I think that this is a well worth going back to.